is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Telly Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. South Korea has slammed the North for blowing up roads linking the two countries, calling it a very abnormal act. And in response, Seoul fired warning shots near the heavily fortified border. But Taiwan says that yesterday's military drills by China that encircled the island included a record number of military aircraft. And now today, the U.S. and the Philippines launch joint exercises in the South China Sea. And the stunting gun fires on the Japanese election race. PM Shigeru Ishiba's scandal-hit LDP and other parties have less than 2 weeks of campaigning to win over voters. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit begins in Pakistan, focusing on regional security and economic cooperation. Yet, notably missing are top leaders from China, India, and Russia. And Chinese authorities move to tax the ultra-rich on overseas investment gains, underscoring Beijing's need to expand its sources of revenue as growth slows. And ahead on East Asia tonight, a desperate search for identity, fueled by hopes of piecing together the puzzle of their origins. Thousands of Koreans living with the consequences of deliberate adoption mix-ups decades ago. Plus, proving that age is just a number. This silver-haired contestant missed out on the crown to be the oldest Miss Universe Korea, but won the admiration of many across the nation. North Korea has blown up the northern parts of the inter-Korean roads situated in their territory. And this destruction comes just days after Pyongyang vowed to seal off its southern border. Well, Seoul said that it fired warning shots in response near the heavily fortified border and criticized the move.
오늘 북한의 경의선 동해선 북측 구간 남북 연결도로 폭파는 남북 합의의 명백한 위반이며 매우 비정상적 조치로서 우리 정부는 이를 강력히 규탄합니다.
Surveillance footage showed clouds of smoke emerging from explosions along the roads that are no longer in use. Seoul adds that its military did not suffer any damage and has bolstered its surveillance and readiness posture in response to the detonations. China has also weighed in, urging all parties to prevent a further escalation of conflict. Last week, Pyongyang announced a plan to completely separate its territory from the south, including cutting off all roads and railway connections. The infrastructure was once seen as a symbol of inter-Korean cooperation. While the north has also reportedly laid fresh mines and built anti-tank barriers along the border since it declared the south a principal enemy earlier this year. Meantime, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un convened a top national security meeting amid a cross-border drone flight dispute. State media reports that Mr. Kim directed a plan of immediate military action in the meeting, expressing a tough stand. Pyongyang has accused Seoul of flying drones over its capital to drop anti-regime leaflets 3 times this month. It warned of a horrible disaster if South Korean drones were found flying over Pyongyang again, and that it's on standby to open fire. Mr. Kim's powerful sister, Kim Yo-jong, also says that her country has secured clear proof that Seoul's military was behind the recent drone incursions, and the South will have to pay a dear price. This comes amid an escalating war of words in recent days. Well, a North Korean expert believes the destruction of the inter-Korea road is Pyongyang's way to demonstrate that it's serious in cutting relations with the South.
지금 북한 청년들, 젊은 세대들 같은 경우에는 남한의 드라마라든가 이제 어떤 한류의 Kpop 등의 영향으로 인해서 남한 사회에 대해서 상당히 큰 동경심을 갖고 있는 상황입니다. 이것을 끊어내는 게 김정은의 지금 최대 과제로 인식이 되고 있고, 그래서 지금 남북한 간의 연결도를 폭파하는 것도 바로 이제 김정은의 단호한 남북 관계 그 단절 의지를 과시하는 거라고 할 수 있습니다. 현재 어떤 한국 정부의 입장과는 무관하게 그들이 다시 풍선을 통해서 전단을 살포하거나 무인기로 북한의 전단을 살포하려 시도할 가능성이 크고요. 이 경우에는 어떤 한국 정부의 의지하고는 무관하게 그러니까 휴전선에서 총격전이 벌어질 수가 있습니다. 만약에 북한 군부에서 전단이나 무인기를 향해서 총탄을 쏜다고 했을 때 그것이 한국에 떨어지면은 한국도 가만히 있을 수는 없는 거 아닙니까? 그렇다 보면은 결국 이것이 어떤 서로 압도적인 대응을 지금 약속하고 있는 상황에서 의도하지 않은 확전으로 연결될 가능성을 배제할 수 없는 상황입니다.
Taiwan says that it detected a record 153 Chinese military aircraft around the island over a 25-hour period after China held large-scale military drills in the vicinity. Taiwan's defense ministry says that the PLA aircraft were detected until 6 a.m. local time today, with 111 of these crossing what Taipei calls the median line that separates the island from mainland China. Beijing does not recognize this informal demarcation in the Taiwan Strait. China wrapped up a major military drill on Monday, which saw Beijing deploying fighter jets, drones, warships, and Coast Guard boats to encircle Taiwan. It came days after Taiwanese President William Lai said that China had no right to represent the island. The exercise drew condemnation from Taipei and Washington, with the U.S. Pentagon calling it, quote, irresponsible, disproportionate, and destabilizing. Japan says it expressed its concerns to China over the drills and scrambled its own fighter jets near the Japanese southern island of Yanaguni as part of a routine response to foreign military aircraft. Beijing says the drill is a just move to safeguard its national sovereignty and territorial integrity.
这次演练，我和战友的核心任务是突破敌防空警戒系统，夺取区域治权，直接检验空域警戒、空战对抗、空中加油等实战能力，就是用敌人听得懂的语言警告台独分子，搞台独就意味着战争，只能引火烧身，自取灭亡。
And on the heels of those Chinese military drills, thousands of U.S. and Philippine Marines have started 10 days of joint exercises dubbed the Kamandag or Venom. The war games are focused on defending the north coast of the Philippines' main island of Luzon and includes live firing drills. U.S. and Philippines are fielding more than 1,000 participants each. Smaller numbers of Australian, British, Japanese, and South Korean forces are also taking part. The Philippine Marines chief stressed that the exercises were long planned and focused on coastal defense and had nothing to do with whatever is happening in the region. Meantime, China is urging the Philippines to respect its sovereignty and stop any moves that may complicate the situation in the disputed waters of the South China Sea. Those remarks come after Manila said that a Chinese maritime militia boat deliberately sideswiped one of its two vessels patrolling near the island of Titu last week. Beijing says the Philippine vessel sailed dangerously and collided with a Chinese boat, adding that such actions seriously threaten the safety of Chinese fishing boats and personnel operating normally in the waters. The Philippines Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, or BFAR, revealed that the BRP Datu Caballo sustained dents in its starboard bow after a Chinese boat bumped into its side during a routine patrol. Manila has also accused Beijing of bolstering its presence in the key waterway. Beijing has refuted those claims, stressing that they are civilian ships. Meantime, Malaysia's Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim says that state energy firm Petronas will continue its oil and gas exploration activities in the South China Sea, despite Beijing's objection. Mr. Anwar defended his country's stance, emphasizing that Malaysia's exploration activities were within its territory.
Malaysia punya isu dengan semua negara jiran, dengan Thailand, dengan Filipina, dengan Indonesia, Singapura umpamanya, ya, dan Brunei, ya. Dan sebab itu kita kurang setuju bila permasalahan pertelingkahan sempadan ini hanya dirojok pada satu negara, umpamanya China. Padahal kita punya masalah. Dan masalah ini tidak menjejaskan hubungan diplomatik. Masalah ini tidak menjejaskan hubungan perdagangan dan persahabatan akrab dengan jiran-jiran kita.
The summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is underway today in the Pakistani capital of Islamabad, but with top leaders from China, India, and Russia absent. China is represented by Li Qiang, the most prominent leader at the gathering and the first Chinese premier to visit Pakistan in more than a decade. He was given a formal welcome and he inaugurated the Gwadar International Airport in Balochistan virtually. Now, this airport is funded by the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. But security concerns are threatening to overshadow the event, with a spate of violent attacks, including some that targeted Chinese nationals, casting doubt on how much progress this summit can achieve. A recent attack in Karachi by a militant group known to target Chinese personnel killed 2 nationals and injured 10 others. Pakistan is on heightened alert and has deployed its army across the capital. And for more, Hira Mustafa, she joins us live now from Islamabad. Hira, perhaps could just tell us a little bit more about the arrangements for the SEO Summit. And I'm also wondering, what is the mood like in Islamabad right now?
Well, absolutely. As you already mentioned, that Pakistan is hosting this high-level international event after a decade. It is pertinent to mention here that stringent security measures are in place. More than 10,000 paramilitary forces are deployed across the capital. Having said that, foreign journalists who have just arrived in Islamabad to cover this heads of government meeting, the hotels in which they are staying are guarded by the army troops. Army troops are marching at all the exit and entry points of the city. It is almost impossible to get into Islamabad at the moment. However, due to security risk, all the schools and businesses are shut. And the capital of Islamabad, which itself is a very vibrant and happening city, is giving a look of giving a deserted look at the moment. And because everybody in the city is talking about the arrival of the dignitaries and SEO conference is the talk of the town. Tomorrow is going to be a big day, as all the heads of government will be coming together and will be talking about the important world affairs. All eyes will be set on the conflict in Gaza. Discussions will be unfolded on war in Ukraine, climate crisis, cross-border terrorism, which Pakistan is facing from past 3 years, and also the Afghan peace process, which is, as per the experts, as the peace in Afghanistan is imperative for the entire region. However, later in the evening, Prime Minister has given a grand welcome dinner for the VIPs and foreign dignitaries who are visiting the capital.
Also, Hira, do we know what was sort of being discussed between the Pakistani Prime Minister and his Chinese counterpart? And I guess how prominently the question of security of Chinese nationals feature in that discussion?
Well, Chinese Prime Minister Li Qiang is visiting for the first time in 11 years to Pakistan. On the sidelines, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Chinese Premier had wide-ranging talks on security discussion, as a visit of Chinese Prime Minister come days after when 2 Chinese nationals were killed in one of the near the largest airport of Pakistan in the metropolitan city of Karachi. Experts believe that in the coming days there will be more talk and discussion on the security issue, in which both Pakistan and Beijing will be sitting together and will be talking about the policies, how both the countries can collaborate militarily and in terms of defense to ensure the safety of Chinese citizens and diplomats who are in the country. As we all know, because of the heightened security risk, Pakistan has come up with a special SOPs and has restricted the limited of the Chinese nationals and dignitaries in the country at the moment. Also, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor Phase 2 would be the priority of the discussion of the Chinese Prime Minister and the Prime Minister of Pakistan in the coming days, as both countries are keen in spearheading the process of CPEC Phase 2, especially the development of special economic zones.
All right, we'll be keeping a close eye on that one. Thanks so very much, Hira Mustafa, speaking to us in Islamabad. Well, we're going to go for a short break now, but coming up next on East Asia tonight, China's private economy in need of more help from the government. A new report shows the top 500 firms slashing jobs last year, despite rising revenues. And property investors in Hong Kong jump in as developers offload homes below cost to clear stock. Hello again. Glad you're still with us on East Asia tonight. It is now time for business news with Roland Lim. And Roland, more signs that Chinese businesses need that little bit of extra help from the government?
That's right. I'll tell you, China's leading private firms slashed their workforce last year, despite a slight growth in their financial performance. Now, that's according to a report published by the country's largest business association. The 500 private enterprises employed 10.66 million people in 2023. That's a reduction of 314,600 jobs compared to a year earlier. Now, that's the biggest decline since employment in China's largest private firms started growing in 2011. The cuts have raised concerns over how private businesses are affected by the ongoing domestic economic slowdown and indicate the need for further government support. Increased automation could also be a factor. The report found that more than 60% of the top 500 private firms are digitalizing their workflows and services. The private economy contributes to more than half of China's tax revenues and over 60% of the national GDP. Last week, Beijing released a draft of a law to help the private sector and has received over 1,000 suggestions from the public. Now, China has reportedly started to enforce a tax on overseas investment gains for the ultra-rich, targeting individuals with significant offshore assets. The move underscores Beijing's need to expand its sources of revenue as land sales tumble and growth slows. According to Bloomberg, tax authorities have asked some wealthy individuals in China to conduct self-assessment in recent months. Others have been summoned to evaluate potential tax liabilities, including taxes owed from previous years. Sources say that such individuals may face investment gains tax of up to 20%. Some may even face penalties for late payments, though the final amount can be negotiated. For the past 6 years, China has been automatically exchanging information with nearly 150 jurisdictions about accounts to people subject to taxes in each member country. President Xi Jinping is wary of widening inequality and has cracked down on billionaires in real estate, tech, and finance. UN data showed a spike in emigration by affluent Chinese citizens, with more than 1.2 million people leaving the country since 2021. Mainland Chinese buyers are helping to fuel Hong Kong's property market. They accounted for more than 7,500 primary and secondary property transactions in the first 8 months of the year, according to property agency Centerline. Now, that's a 70% on-year rise. At the same time, Hong Kong developers are enticing buyers with deep discounts. Now, top residential developer Sun Hung Kay Properties has sold out of two batches of apartments at a project at the former Kai Tak Airport. What's grabbing attention is that the average price of the units is about 10% less than what the developer paid for it to develop the land. Tycoon Li Ka-shing's flagship developer, CK Asset Holdings, also priced a new batch of flats on the south side of Hong Kong Island at roughly 20% lower than its development cost. According to property agency Midlands, investors made up around 40% of the buyers. After tumbling to an 8-year low, sales of both new and used homes have jumped in the past couple of weeks, and thanks to an interest rate cut as well as a stock market rally. A quick check on markets in Asia. Volatility continues to prevail in the Greater China markets. Beijing's stimulus hopes waning as weak economic data out from China dents sentiment. Shanghai Composite gave up 2.5% in heavy trading, Shenzhen falling by about the same margin. In Hong Kong, the Hang Seng Index slumped 3.7%, and that's its second day of losses. China's main equity indices saw wild swings yesterday, but they ended higher at the close. Analysts say investors will be bracing for more gyrations in the market, but there will be growing confidence as well in the medium-term outlook. Supporting sentiment, local media reports say that China may raise some 6 trillion yuan from ultra-long special government bonds over 3 years to prop up the economy. Asian markets elsewhere headed higher following a solid handover from Wall Street. In Tokyo, the Nikkei 225 ending 0.7% higher, briefly touching a 3-month high after yesterday's holiday. The Japanese chipmakers rallied following Nvidia's record close on Wall Street. The Kospi ending the day 0.4% nearly up, and the Taiwan weighted index 1.4% higher. Meantime, oil continues to track lower in Asian trade, both main oil contracts dropping about 5% after reports saying that the Israeli Prime Minister had pledged to target Iran's military rather than its crude and nuclear sector. OPEC lowering its forecast for global oil demand and China's oil imports dropping for a fifth month in a row, also adding to the slide. Hyundai India's $3.3 billion IPO, the country's biggest share sale yet, opened for retail buyers today. It'll remain available for investors until Thursday. The Indian IPO is Hyundai's first stock market listing outside of South Korea. The government of Singapore and BlackRock together picked up stakes worth a total of $77.3 million, while Fidelity bought shares worth $76.5 million. Domestic mutual funds were allocated shares worth some $340 million. Hyundai will not issue new shares in the IPO. Its South Korean parent will sell up to 17.5% of its stake in the wholly owned unit. That will value it at $19 billion. At that size, Hyundai India will make up about 40% of the parent company's Hyundai Motors market capitalization. The IPO shows continued enthusiasm for India's capital markets. 260 companies have raised more than $9 billion so far in India. Another IPO making a promising start, Tokyo Metro has raised $2.3 billion in Japan's largest listing in 6 years, after pricing its IPO at the top end of its price range. It was reportedly more than 15 times oversubscribed. Now, many investors were drawn by the household name and the firm's attractive dividend yield. The central government, which owns 53.4% of Tokyo Metro, and the Tokyo government, which holds the remaining 46.6%, are selling half of their shares in the IPO. It is expected to list on the Tokyo Stock Exchange next Wednesday. China Resources Beverage has applied for a $650 million Hong Kong IPO, making it the city's largest listing this year. The company is offering about 348 million shares at up to $14.50 Hong Kong apiece. It could raise as much as $747 million with an over-allotment option that allows IPO arrangers to sell additional shares. The bottled water maker has started taking orders and shares are due to start trading on the 23rd of October. Cornerstone investors include UBS Asset Management, and they've agreed to buy some $310 million worth of stock. China's auto exports remains resilient despite looming EV tariffs from the EU. Shipments of both cars and ships especially have hit records in September, even as broader shipments slowed. Now, it underscores the fast-growing changes that's fueling global trade tensions. According to official data, Chinese automakers shipped more than $11.5 billion worth of vehicles last month, taking the total this year to almost $88 billion. Now, China's ship exports also rode high on that tidal wave of demand. 464 new builds were sold overseas worth some $4.6 billion, and that's the most ever, and more than double the amount the same month last year. The sudden rise in exports of Chinese-made EVs or electric vehicles has already caused concern in developed countries, with the EU, Canada, and the US all imposing tariffs on Chinese autos. And China has been mired in deflation and is shipping more overseas to make up for weak demand and falling prices locally. And that is... that's it.
That's
no
it.
More.
Thank you so very much, Roland, for that. Right, we're going to go for a short break now. But coming up next on East Asia tonight, a deepening diplomatic row between India and Canada. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau alleging a wider campaign by the Modi government against Sikh separatists as both countries expel each other's top diplomats. Plus,
I'm Sally Patterson in Las Vegas, Nevada, where women face some of the highest childcare costs in the country. How could that issue affect November's presidential election? That story coming up.
You're watching East Asia tonight. South Korea slammed the North for blowing up roads linking the two countries, calling it a very abnormal act. In response, Seoul fired warning shots near the heavily fortified border. Taiwan says that yesterday's military drills by China that encircled the island included a record number of military aircraft. And today, the US and Philippines launched joint exercises in the South China Sea. Japan's election season officially begins. PM Shigeru Ishiba's scandal-hit LDP and other parties have less than 2 weeks of campaigning to win over voters. And staying with that story, more than 1,300 candidates are contesting 465 seats in the lower house of the Diet, 289 in single-seat constituencies, and another 176 elected through a system of proportional representation. Well, CNA's Michio Ishida tells us more.
Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba kicked off the Liberal Democratic Party's campaign in Fukushima. He expressed regret for its slush fund scandal, promising that proceeds from fundraising will not be underreported again. Former Prime Minister Yoshihiko Noda, the leader of the biggest opposition party, is hoping to capitalize on the public's loss of trust in the ruling party. Mr. Noda was at the Tokyo suburb of Hachioji, which was previously represented by an LDP heavyweight linked to the scandal.
2720万円ですか？上から3番目の巨額なんですよ。上から3番目の巨額。政治資金は非課税ですよ。
Mr. Noda was referring to the amount allegedly underreported by Koichi Hagyuda, a former cabinet minister. He was the LDP's chief policymaker until the scandal came to light.
改めてご心配をおかけした、また不快な思いをさせた皆様にお詫びを申し上げたいと思います。申し訳ありませんでした。
He denied any deliberate mishandling of the funds received and tried to appease the electorate by emphasizing his track record of supporting the local economy and education system. Media polls suggest 60 to 70% of those surveyed lost trust in the government. Over 80 upper and lower house members were linked to slush funds since the scandal came to light last year. In all, Mr. Ishiba decided not to endorse 15 candidates, among them political heavyweights. Separately, another 34 LDP candidates are allowed to run in constituencies, but will not be given a seat through proportional representation if they fail. LDP's desire to improve its image is opening up doors for new candidates, such as 39-year-old Kaoru Fukuda.
私自身は女性限定公募で選ばれました。初めての自民党の試みで女性限定でした。
LDP has fielded 56 women candidates, the highest number ever, and they're hoping to bring changes to the scandal-tainted ruling party, which has traditionally been dominated by political families. Michio Ishida, CNA, Tokyo.
Nobel Economics Prize laureates for this year gave praise for South Korea's remarkable economic rise during a press conference a day after their win. Well, the trio was given the award for their research, which found that freer and open societies are more likely to prosper. The differences between North and South Korea was a key subject of their study. But the Nobel Prize winners flagged that South Korea's economy is not without challenges.
South Korean economy, which is not without its problems today, but it's in much better shape, and their achievements are really remarkable compared to what some other countries have been able to pull off.
The South and the North, according to the best data we have, were on a par before the country was separated and diverged in terms of its institutions. And over time, a more than tenfold difference built up.
South Korea's Unification Ministry reported earlier this year that the economic gap with the North has appeared to have widened in almost every aspect, including food, housing, education, and access to health care. North Korea defectors have also described deepening inequality between elite residents in major cities and farmers in rural areas. Well, we now turn to the strained ties between India and Canada. The two countries expelled each other's top diplomats, the latest moves in a row over the assassination of a Sikh separatist leader on Canadian soil last year. Well, Canada expelled 6 Indian diplomats, including the High Commissioner, linking them to the murder of a Sikh activist. Well, India retaliated by ordering the expulsion of 6 high-ranking Canadian diplomats. Well, Canada claims police have concrete evidence identifying half a dozen individuals as persons of interest in the assassination case. And officials are also alleging a broader campaign to target Indian dissidents in Canada. Well, the Canadian Foreign Ministry said it requested India to waive the diplomatic immunity of these 6 diplomats so police could question them. But New Delhi declined. Well, India has consistently denied the accusations. It dismissed Canada's inquiry, accusing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of pursuing a political agenda. Well, Canada is home to the highest population of Sikhs outside of Punjab, and recent demonstrations in support of a separate Sikh state have further strained relations with India. Well, Arnold Gay has more on the escalating tensions between India and Canada, sparked by allegations linking the Indian government to the assassination of Sikh activist Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
Relations between India and Canada have been tense since late last year when Mr. Trudeau claimed credible information linking New Delhi to Nijjar's assassination on Canadian soil. Nijjar was shot dead in June 2023 outside a Sikh temple in Vancouver. He was a Canadian citizen campaigning for the creation of an independent Sikh state carved out of India. In September, Mr. Trudeau said his government uncovered evidence linking New Delhi to the killing. India dismissed the allegation immediately as absurd and accused Canada of harboring terrorists. As diplomatic tensions escalated, protests erupted in parts of Canada and India demanding justice for Nijjar's killing. In November last year, the U.S. said it thwarted a plot to kill another Sikh separatist, Gurpatwan Singh Punan, in New York. Washington warned India over concerns that New Delhi was involved. In May this year, Canadian police charged 3 Indian nationals for Nijjar's murder. Officials have been investigating if they have any ties to the Indian government. But New Delhi insists Ottawa has yet to share any evidence to back up its allegation.
Ishan Garg tells us more about how the latest development is between India and Canada would impact the already strained ties between both countries.
Well, we have not heard from the Indian government since Justin Trudeau held a press conference where he said that the allegations of Indian officials perhaps being involved in the murder of a Sikh separatist leader, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, they were shared with the Indian government, and Trudeau said that the Indian government has not taken those conversations seriously. We are yet to hear from the Indian government, but the last statement that did come out on Monday evening from the Indian government ended on a rather ominous note. It said that the Indian government feels that it will be right in taking further diplomatic steps against Canada. And just a few hours after that, we heard that India had asked 6 Canadian diplomats to leave. And there is an expectation now that this is going to snowball into a bigger diplomatic conflict between the two countries. Now, ties between India and Canada have been on a rather frosty road for the past 1 year since Justin Trudeau alleged that Indian government was involved in murder of Nijjar. And since then, we've seen rounds and rounds of diplomatic escalations. But this seems to be a new low, and analysts here are expecting that there might be more diplomatic retaliation from the Indian side, which could include some form of curbs on visas being allotted, and that could impact a lot of people because Canada is home to the largest number of Sikhs outside of Punjab, many of whom still have families here back in India. So there's certainly a huge amount of tension between the two countries, and there's every expectation that this diplomatic tussle is far from over.
Over in the U.S., the cost of childcare is becoming a top issue for voters, with families saying it could affect their ballot in next month's election. OECD figures show that childcare costs in the U.S. account for 32% of an average couple's income. That's the highest among all developed countries. And mothers are often forced to stay home instead, undermining progress in gender equality. Sally Patterson traveled to Las Vegas in the swing state of Nevada to find out more.
Working mothers are used to having their hands full. But lately, day-to-day expenses have become too difficult to balance in the United States.
It's going up, like everything is rising.
Charlena Stokes ended up at this housing program for homeless mothers in Las Vegas with daughters Kimiko and Rumani earlier this year when the cost of living became unlivable.
It's a struggle. You're juggling a lot. You're trying to get groceries. You're trying to find the schooling for them, and then you're trying to juggle work on top of that. And if you have school too, it's a lot.
She tells me she was forced to leave her job because she couldn't afford childcare.
It feels overwhelming. It seems like, I moved 5 steps forward and I get pushed 10 steps back.
Many mothers at Living Grace homes say they face a similar uphill battle. Overall prices may be slowly stabilising, but over the past year, daycare costs have risen 6.2%, more than double the rate of inflation. Daycare for a child under 5 in Vegas costs around $1,300 a month, according to the Department of Labor. That's a strain on most two-parent households. For many single mums, it's out of reach.
It's not easy raising a kid by yourself because they have their needs, you have your own needs.
Those are needs presidential candidates are looking to meet, announcing new policies on the campaign trail. Kamala Harris said she'll cap working families' childcare costs and give parents tax breaks. Donald Trump says his tariffs on foreign imports will make the country better off overall, though he hasn't made it clear how that will impact childcare costs directly. Away from the wealth of Sin City's casinos, though, parents say election promises won't pay their bills. Driving around the suburbs of Vegas, the mothers I've spoken to feel the odds are stacked against them. They're counting on the next president to fix the country's childcare crisis. Every Nevada county is considered a childcare desert. Almost 3/4 of young children don't have access to licensed care, according to the governor's office.
We are a 24-hour town, and we really depend on our family child care providers because oftentimes they have increased hours. They might be 24 hours, to take care of the children while the parents go to work.
During the COVID-19 pandemic, many providers closed down and haven't been replaced. Compared to other service industries, wages in the sector remain low.
They rely on me.
So low that preschool assistant Ariel Rollins is considering getting a second job. Donald Trump's running mate J.D. Vance says grandparents should be stepping in to help, a suggestion Ariel and daughter Addison don't find very helpful.
My parents, they're up in age, they're elderly. They cannot, take care of my children, let alone they're trying to survive themselves.
Both Harris and Trump promised to make costs more affordable for parents, but
honestly, I don't think either one will. I'm the type of person, my parents always taught me, actions speak louder than words. So in order for me to believe it, I have to see it.
Regina blushed.
As U.S. childcare reaches crisis point, mothers are warning both presidential candidates to listen to their concerns, or it could cost them the parent vote this November. Sally Patterson, CNA, Las Vegas, Nevada.
And tomorrow, in the final part of this series, Sally takes us to Arizona to speak with the women on either side of the United States' heated abortion debate. All right, we're going to go for another short break, but coming up in East Asia tonight. These pandas are en route to the U.S. as part of a renewed deal with China to get these beloved bears to America. They are the first to be sent to Washington in more than 2 decades. Plus, in search of their roots, Koreans adopted overseas uncover a web of deliberate information mix-ups widespread in South Korea's adoption system. You know that Kpop idol Hany from girl group New Jeans? Well, she's appeared as a witness in front of South Korean lawmakers, recounting her experience of alleged workplace bullying within her parent company label Hybe. And Hybe, as you may well know, is a South Korean agency that manages popular boy band like BTS. A 20-year-old Vietnamese Australian says she decided to attend the inquiry to prevent something similar from happening again, and that others would not have to endure this. In her remarks, the teary-eyed K-pop idol questioned the hostility she faced. She said she overheard a manager of another girl group, one that's linked to a parent agency, instructing idols to ignore her whenever they walked by one another. Well, her testimony comes amid a boardroom conflict involving Hany's producer and a South Korean agency. The alleged event took place amid a dispute between New Jeans producer and mastermind Min Hee-jin, who was removed as chief executive of subsidiary label Adore and Hybe. Last month, New Jeans held a live stream on their own, calling on the entertainment conglomerate to reinstate their music producer as Ador's CEO, with Hany raising the harassment claim. Multiple court cases on the issue are ongoing. Now, what are the odds of having one's birth certificate swapped with another person? Well, possibly higher than you'd imagine, at least for the case of thousands of South Korean adoptees who are still in search of their true identity. Though years have passed since they've started their journey, some still haven't quite found out who they truly are.
Rebecca Kimmel knew she had been adopted, but she didn't know if her adoptive parents really chose her. She had been left on the streets as an infant in Gwangju City in South Korea back in the 70s, when many households were struggling and had no choice but to abandon their children. Her adoption agency has a picture of what seems like Rebecca as an infant, with a piece of paper on her clothing and her birth date written on it. Rebecca was adopted 6 months later by a family in the US and has been living happily since. But a small detail always bothered her. The photo her parents showed of her from South Korea didn't look like those of her growing up in the States.
From a very early age, and I can't remember exactly when, it may have been when I was 10 or in my early teens, I didn't think that the photo looked like me. And I would say to my mother, my adoptive mother, I don't think this is me, it doesn't look like me. But my parents' response was sort of, oh, babies change.
Rebecca wanted to be on top of all this. That's why in 2018, she flew to Seoul and visited her adoption agency to see her records. What was inside her documents proved shocking. It was a different photo of a baby than the one her adoptive parents had shown her. But Rebecca was certain it was her.
I think for a lot of us, like who are switched, we just feel a sense of desperation because we know we're not going to get the answers, but we know they have some pieces of, that puzzle.
The first puzzle piece came from a social worker at Rebecca's adoption agency. The social worker admitted that switching children's identities was quite common during South Korea's adoption rush in the 1970s and 80s. During this period, around 200,000 Korean children were sent to parents overseas. When children died or became too sick, agencies swapped photos and made up stories and false documents. Western agencies were allegedly willing to take any child of the same sex or similar age. To address this issue, South Korea launched a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. The organization interviews adoptees in an effort to help them match the pieces of their identity puzzle.
저희 추정으로는 이 행정 절차를 다시 밟는 게 비용이나 시간적으로 효율적이지 않기 때문에 이렇게 쉬운 방법을 택했을 가능성이 있지 않겠나라는 건데 이건 이제 추가로 참고인 조사를 더 해봐야 됩니다.
While the commission is still digging for more information, Rebecca did her own research. After reviewing her files, she found a message written by an old man named Park Jong-kyun. Mr. Park had been looking for twin girls put up for adoption between the years 1973 and 76. It took Rebecca 3 years to track down who could be her potential birth father. But a DNA test showed no relation.
Turned out to be not a match. It was very devastating to learn that we were not related, even though this is a very, very far-fetched possibility that we could be related. Took those tests back with me to the US, processed them, and 21 days later found Mr. Park's real twins.
Although reuniting a birth family brought Rebecca some happiness, she remains on the arduous task of searching for her true identity.
It's very, very traumatic, to say the least, to not understand what happened, to not be able to get answers about what the truth is, and to experience so many layers of gaslighting over time regarding what your real identity is.
Well, staying in South Korea, a senior fashion model is basking in her newfound celebrity fame after winning the Best Dressed award at Miss Universe Korea this month.
Meet the world's oldest Miss Universe Korea contestant, Choi Soon-hwa. She's defying stereotypes one pose at a time. Age is not a barrier. Ms. Choi made history at the age of 80 after the pageant dropped age restrictions this year as part of efforts to modernize and diversify the competition. Previously, only women between the ages of 18 and 28 were eligible.
나이 제한이 없다 하니까 옳다구나 잘됐다. 내가 바라던 거네요. 잘됐다. 기회 놓치면 안 돼. 나 80인데 기회 놓치면 안 돼. 그리고 제가 나가게 된 거죠.
The silver-haired grandmother may have missed out on the crown, but she won the Best Dressed award, beating other rivals a quarter her age. Even friends who are many years younger are impressed.
TV에 너무 멋지신 분이 딱 보이더라고요. 그래서 저분처럼 나도 이렇게 시니어 모델을 하고 싶다 해서 도전을 하게 됐어요. 그리고 이렇게 실제로 옆에서 보니까 너무 건강하고 긍정적인 그 마인드를 갖고 계셔서 저도 점점점 그 옆에서 찾고 듣고 배우고 롤모델로 삼고 있습니다.
The South Korean senior says she had dreams of becoming a fashion model or a movie star in her younger days, but life's pressures stood in the way. As a single mother, she had to take on jobs and care for her children.
지금 후반전에 가서 승리한 거야. 전반전은 그냥 쫓아다니고 그냥 골도 하나 못 넣다가 후반전에 지금 골 넣었죠. 그래서 저를 보면은 많은 분들이 용기와 희망을 가지고 한번 도전해봐라. 그 말을 하고 싶어요.
The former hospital care worker began her modeling career when one patient encouraged her to do so at the age of 72. It would take another 2 years before she made her runway debut. Since then, Ms. Choi has appeared at fashion shows, in magazines, and on television programs.
이런 일이 나에게 있을 수 있나? 요즘같이 내가 정말 늙어 복을 받았다. 복 받은 할머니. 앞으로 제 인생이 젊을 때는 참 많은 고난이 지나갔는데 내가 이제 이렇게 많이 알려지고 이래서 그냥 마음이 이런 말할 표현이에요. 할 수가 없어요.
The 81-year-old also shares tips on how to stay young and feel good. That includes starting each day with a healthy breakfast, boiled eggs and fruit, as well as taking walks at a nearby park.
Before we go, see how two giant pandas are heading to their new home in Washington's National Zoo. Well, the 3-year-old bears, Ting Bao and Bao Li, officially departed for their new home after they were loaded on a plane. While en route, their in-flight meals will include bamboo shoots, carrots, and Chinese cornbread. And upon arrival, they will enter quarantine and acclimatize to their new habitat before they're introduced to the public. The panda's arrival is part of a new 10-year agreement, despite rising diplomatic tensions between the U.S. and China. For decades, China has sent pandas to foreign countries as part of what's being called a panda diplomacy, to build foreign relations, boost trade ties, and bolster Beijing's global image. And that's it on East Asia tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia. And look us up on Facebook, YouTube, and on X. Thanks for watching.